Chapter 9. A New Use for a Tea-Table. If I were to detail the ordinary events of my daily life at this time, they might prove instructive to people who are not familiar with the insides of palaces. If I revealed some of the secrets I learnt, they might prove of interest to the statesmen of Europe. I intend to do neither of these things. I should be between the Scylla of dullness and the Charybdis of indiscretion, and I feel that I had far better confine myself strictly to the underground drama which was being played beneath the surface of Ruritanian politics. I need only say that the secret of my imposture defied detection. I made mistakes. I had bad minutes. It needed all the tact and graciousness whereof I was master to smooth over some of the apparent lapses of memory and unmindfulness of old acquaintances of which I was guilty. But I escaped, and I attribute my escape, as I have said before, most of all, to the very audacity of the enterprise. It is my belief that, given the necessary physical likeness, it was far easier to pretend to be the King of Ruritania than it would have been to personate my next-door neighbour. One day Sapt came into my room. He threw me a letter, saying, "That's for you. A woman's hand, I think. But I've some news for you first." "What's that?" "The King's at the castle of Zenda," said he. "How do you know?" "Because the other half of Michael's Six are there. I had inquiries made, and they're all there. Lauengram, Krafstein, and young Rupert Hentzau. 3 rogues, too, on my honour, as fine as live in Ruritania." "Well?" "Well, Fritz wants you to march to the castle with horse, foot, and artillery." "And drag the moat?" I asked. "That would be about it," grinned Sapt. "And we shouldn't find the King's body then." "You think it certain that he's there?" "Very probable. Besides the fact of those 3 being there, the drawbridge is kept up, and no one goes in without an order from young Hentzau or Black Michael himself. We must tie Fritz up." "I'll go to Zenda," said I. "You're mad." "Some day." "Oh, perhaps. You'll very likely stay there, though, if you do." "That may be, my friend." "His Majesty looks sulky," observed Sapt. "How's the love affair?" "Damn you, hold your tongue!" I said. He looked at me for a moment, and then he lit his pipe. It was quite true that I was in a bad temper, and I went on perversely: "Wherever I go, I'm dogged by 6 fellows." "I know you are. I send them," he replied composedly. "What for?" "Well," said Sapt, puffing away, "it wouldn't be exactly inconvenient for Black Michael if you disappeared. With you gone, the old game that we stopped would be played, or he'd have a shot at it. I can take care of myself. De Gautet, Bercelin, and Deschardes are in Strelsau, and any one of them, lad, would cut your throat as readily as I would Black Michael's, and a deal more treacherously. What's the letter?" I opened it and read it aloud. "If the King desires to know what it deeply concerns the King to know, let him do as this letter bids him. At the end of the New Avenue there stands a house in large grounds. The house has a portico with a statue of a nymph on it. A wall encloses the garden. There is a gate in the wall at the back. At 12 o'clock tonight, if the King enters alone by that gate, turns to the right and walks 20 yards, he will find a summer house approached by a flight of 6 steps. If he mounts and enters, he will find some one who will tell him what touches most dearly his life and his throne. This is written by a faithful friend. He must be alone. If he neglects the invitation, his life will be in danger. Let him show this to no one, or he will ruin a woman who loves him. Black Michael does not pardon." "No," observed Sapt as I ended, "but he can dictate a very pretty letter." I had arrived at the same conclusion, and was about to throw the letter away, when I saw there was more writing on the other side. "Hullo, there's some more." "If you hesitate," the writer continued, "consult Colonel Sapt." "Eh?" exclaimed that gentleman, genuinely astonished. "Does she take me for a greater fool than you?" I waved him to be silent. "Ask him what woman would do most to prevent the Duke from marrying his cousin. and therefore most to prevent him becoming king, and ask if her name begins with A." I sprang to my feet. Sapt laid down his pipe. "Antoinette de Mauban, by heaven!" I cried. "How do you know?" asked Sapt. I told him what I knew of the lady, and how I knew it. He nodded. "It's so far true that she'd had a great row with Michael," said he, thoughtfully. "If she would, she could be useful," I said. "I believe, though, that Michael wrote that letter." "So do I, but I mean to know for certain. I shall go, Sapt." "No, I shall go," said he. "You may go as far as the gate. I shall go as far as the summer house." "I'm hanged if you shall." I rose and leant my back against the mantelpiece. "Sapt, I believe in that woman, and I shall go." "I don't believe in any woman," said Sapt, "and you shan't go." "I either go to the summer house or back to England," said I. Sapt began to know exactly how far he could lead or drive, and when he must follow. "We're playing against time," I added. "Every day we leave the King where he is, there is fresh risk. Every day I masquerade like this, there is fresh risk. Sapt, we must play high. We must force the game." "So be it," he said, with a sigh. To cut the story short, at 11:30 that night, Sapt and I mounted our horses. Fritz was again left on guard, our destination not being revealed to him. It was a very dark night. I wore no sword, but I carried a revolver, a long knife, and a bull's-eye lantern. We arrived outside the gate. I dismounted. Sapt held out his hand. "I shall wait here," he said. "If I hear a shot, I'll stay where you are. It's the King's only chance. You mustn't come to grief, too." "You're right, lad. Good luck." I pressed the little gate. It yielded, and I found myself in a wild sort of shrubbery. There was a grass-grown path, and turning to the right as I had been bidden, I followed it cautiously. My lantern was closed. The revolver was in my hand. I heard not a sound. Presently a large dark object loomed out of the gloom ahead of me. It was the summer house. Reaching the steps, I mounted them, and found myself confronted by a weak, rickety wooden door which hung upon the latch. I pushed it open and walked in. A woman flew to me and seized my hand. "Shut the door," she whispered. I obeyed, and turned the light of my lantern on her. She was in evening dress, arrayed very sumptuously, and her dark, striking beauty was marvellously displayed in the glare of the bull's-eye. The summer house was a bare little room, furnished only with a couple of chairs and a small iron table, such as one sees in a tea garden or an open-air café. "Don't talk," she said. "We've no time. Listen. I know you, Mr. Rassendyll. I wrote that letter at the Duke's orders." "So I thought," said I. "In 20 minutes 3 men will be here to kill you." "3? The 3?" "Yes. You must be gone by then. If not, tonight you'll be killed." "Or they will." "Listen, listen. When you're killed, your body will be taken to a low quarter of the town. It will be found there. Michael will at once arrest all your friends, Colonel Sapt and Captain von Tarlenheim first, proclaim a state of siege in Strelsau, and send a messenger to Zenda. The other 3 will murder the King in the castle, and the Duke will proclaim either himself or the Princess, himself if he is strong enough. Anyhow, he'll marry her and become king in fact, and soon in name. Do you see? It's a pretty plot. But why, madam, do you... Say I'm a Christian, or say I'm jealous. My God, shall I see him marry her? Now go, but remember, this is what I have to tell you, that never by night or by day are you safe. 3 men follow you as a guard. Is it not so? Well, 3 follow them. Michael's 3 are never 200 yards from you. Your life is not worth a moment if ever they find you alone. Now go. Stay, the gate will be guarded by now. Go down softly, go past the summer house, on for 100 yards, and you'll find a ladder against the wall. Get over it and fly for your life." "And you?" I asked. "I have my game to play too. If he finds out what I have done, we shall not meet again. If not, I may yet... But never mind. Go at once." "And what will you tell him?" that you never came, that you saw through the trick." I took her hand and kissed it. "Madame," said I, "you have served the King well tonight. Where is he in the castle?" She sank her voice to a fearful whisper. I listened eagerly. "Across the drawbridge you come to a heavy door. Behind that lies... Hark! What was that?" There were steps outside. "They're coming! They're too soon! Heavens, they're too soon!" And she turned pale as death. "They seem to me," said I, "to be in the nick of time." "Close your lantern. See, there's a chink in the door. Can you see them?" I put my eye to the chink. On the lowest step I saw 3 dim figures. I cocked my revolver. Antoinette hastily laid her hand on mine. "You may kill one," said she, "but what then?" A voice came from outside, a voice that spoke perfect English. "Mr. Rassendyll," it said. I made no answer. "We want to talk to you. Will you promise not to shoot till we've done?" "Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Detchard?" I said. "Never mind names." "Then let mine alone." "All right, sire. I've an offer for you." I still had my eye to the chink. The 3 had mounted 2 steps more. 3 revolvers pointed full at the door. "Will you let us in? We pledge our honour to observe the truce." "Don't trust them," whispered Antoinette. "We can speak through the door," said I. "But you might open it and fire," objected Detchard. "And though we should finish you, you might finish one of us. Will you give your honour not to fire while we talk?" "Don't trust them," whispered Antoinette again. A sudden idea struck me. I considered it for a moment. It seemed feasible. "I give my honour not to fire before you do," said I. "But I won't let you in. Stand outside and talk." "That's sensible," he said. The 3 mounted the last step, and stood just outside the door. I laid my ear to the chink. I could hear no words, but Detchard's head was close to that of the taller of his companions. Decoy, I guessed. Private communications, thought I. Then I said aloud: "Well, gentlemen, what's the offer?" "A safe conduct to the frontier, and £50,000 English." "No, no!" whispered Antoinette in the lowest of whispers. "They're treacherous." "That seems handsome," said I, reconnoitring through the chink. They were all close together, just outside the door now. I had probed the hearts of the ruffians, and I did not need Antoinette's warning. They meant to rush me as soon as I was engaged in talk. "Give me a moment to consider," said I, and I thought I heard a laugh outside. I turned to Antoinette. "Stand up close to the wall, out of the line of fire from the door," I whispered. "What are you going to do?" she asked in fright. "You'll see," said I. I took up the little iron table. It was not very heavy for a man of my strength, and I held it by the legs. The top, protruding in front of me, made a complete screen for my head and body. I fastened my closed lantern to my belt, and put my revolver in a handy pocket. Suddenly I saw the door move ever so slightly. Perhaps it was the wind, perhaps it was a hand trying it outside. I drew back as far as I could from the door, holding the table in the position that I have described. Then I called out: "Gentlemen, I accept your offer, relying on your honour. If you will open the door..." "Open it yourself," said Detchard. "It opens outward," said I. "Stand back a little, gentlemen, or I shall hit you when I open it." I went and fumbled with the latch. Then I stole back to my place on tiptoe. "I can't open it," I cried. "The latch has caught." "I'll open it," cried Detchard. "Nonsense, Bersonin, why not? Are you afraid of one man?" I smiled to myself. An instant later the door was flung back. The gleam of a lantern showed me the 3 close together outside, their revolvers levelled. With a shout I charged at my utmost pace across the summer house and through the doorway. 3 shots rang out and battered into my shield. Another moment and I leapt out, and the table caught them full and square. and in a tumbling, swearing, struggling mass, they and I and that brave table rolled down the steps of the summer-house to the ground below. Antoinette de Mauban shrieked, but I rose to my feet, laughing aloud. De Gautet and Bersonin lay like men stunned. Detchard was under the table, but as I rose he pushed it from him and fired again. I raised my revolver and took a snapshot. I heard him curse. Then I ran like a hare, laughing as I went, past the summer-house and along the wall. I heard steps behind me, and turning round I fired again for luck. The steps ceased. "Please God," said I, "she told me the truth about the ladder," for the wall was high and topped with iron spikes. Yes, there it was. I was up and over in a minute. Doubling back, I saw the horses. Then I heard a shot. It was Sapt. He had heard us, and was battling and raging with the locked gate, hammering it and firing into the keyhole like a man possessed. He had quite forgotten that he was not to take part in the fight. Whereat I laughed aloud, and said as I clapped him on the shoulder, "Come home to bed, old chap. I've got the finest tea-table story that you ever heard." He started and cried, "You're safe!" and wrung my hand. But a moment later he added, "And what the devil are you laughing at?" "Four gentlemen round a tea-table," said I, laughing still, for it had been uncommonly ludicrous to see the formidable three altogether routed and scattered, with no more deadly weapon than an ordinary tea-table. Moreover, you will observe that I had honourably kept my word, and not fired till they did. Chapter 10. A great chance for a villain. It was the custom that the Prefect of Police should send every afternoon a report to me on the condition of the capital and the feeling of the people. The document included also an account of the movements of any persons whom the police had received instructions to watch. Since I had been in Strelsau, Sapt had been in the habit of reading the report and telling me any items of interest which it might contain. On the day after my adventure in the summer-house, he came in as I was playing a hand of écarté with Fritz von Tarlenheim. "The report is rather full of interest this afternoon," he observed, sitting down. "Do you find," I asked, "any mention of a certain fracas?" He shook his head with a smile. "I find this first," he said. "His Highness the Duke of Strelsau left the city, so far as it appears, suddenly, accompanied by several of his household. His destination is believed to be the castle of Zenda, but the party travelled by road and not by train. Messieurs de Gautet, Bersonin, and Detchard followed an hour later, the last named carrying his arm in a sling. The cause of his wound is not known, but it is suspected that he has fought a duel, probably incidental to a love affair." "That is remotely true," I observed, very well pleased to find that I had left my mark on the fellow. "Then we come to this," pursued Sapt. "Madame de Mauban, whose movements have been watched according to instructions, left by train at midday. She took a ticket for Dresden." "It's an old habit of hers," said I. "The Dresden trains stop at Zenda. An acute fellow, this. And finally, listen to this. The state of feeling in the city is not satisfactory. The King is much criticised you know he's told to be quite frank for taking no steps about his marriage. From inquiries among the entourage of the Princess Flavia, Her Royal Highness is believed to be deeply offended by the remissness of His Majesty. The common people are coupling her name with that of the Duke of Strelsau, and the Duke gains much popularity from the suggestion. I have caused the announcement that the King gives a ball tonight in honour of the Princess to be widely diffused, and the effect is good." "That is news to me," said I. "Oh, the preparations are all made," laughed Fritz. "I've seen to that." Sapt turned to me and said in a sharp, decisive voice, "You must make love to her tonight, you know." "I think it very likely I shall, if I see her alone," said I. "Hang it, Sapt, you don't suppose I find it difficult?" Fritz whistled a bar or two. Then he said, "You'll find it only too easy. Look here, I hate telling you this, but I must. The Countess Helga told me that the Princess had become most attached to the King Since the coronation, her feelings have undergone a marked development. It's quite true that she's deeply wounded by the King's apparent neglect." "Oh, here's a kettle of fish!" I groaned. "Tut, tut!" said Sapt. "I suppose you've made pretty speeches to a girl before now. That's all she wants?" Fritz, himself a lover, understood better my distress. He laid his hand on my shoulder, but said nothing. "I think, though," pursued that cold-blooded old Sapt, "that you'd better make your offer tonight. Good heavens! Or at any rate go near it, and I shall send a semi-official to the papers." "I'll do nothing of the sort. No more will you," said I. "I utterly refuse to take part in making a fool of the princess." Sapt looked at me with his small, keen eyes. A slow, cunning smile passed over his face. "All right, lad, all right," said he. "We mustn't press you too hard. Soothe her down a bit, if you can, you know. Now for Michael." "Oh, damn Michael!" said I. "He'll do tomorrow. Here, Fritz, come for a stroll in the garden." Sapt at once yielded. His rough manner covered a wonderful tact, and, as I came to recognize more and more, a remarkable knowledge of human nature. Why did he urge me so little about the princess? Because he knew that her beauty and my ardour would carry me further than all his arguments, and that the less I thought about the thing, the more likely was I to do it. He must have seen the unhappiness he might bring on the princess, but that went for nothing with him. Can I say confidently that he was wrong? If the King were restored, the princess must turn to him, either knowing or not knowing the change. And if the King were not restored to us? It was a subject that we had never yet spoken of, but I had an idea that in such a case Sapt meant to seat me on the throne of Ruritania for the term of my life. He would have set Satan himself there sooner than that pupil of his, Black Michael. The ball was a sumptuous affair. I opened it by dancing a quadrille with Flavia. Then I waltzed with her. Curious eyes and eager whispers attended us. We went into supper, and half-way through, I, half mad by then, for her glance had answered mine, and her quick breathing met my stammered sentences, I rose in my place before all the brilliant crowd, and, taking the red rose that I wore, flung the ribbon with its jewelled badge round her neck. In a tumult of applause, I sat down. I saw Sapt smiling over his wine, and Fritz frowning. The rest of the meal passed in silence. Neither Flavia nor I could speak. Fritz touched me on the shoulder, and I rose, gave her my arm, and walked down the hall into a little room where coffee was served to us. The gentlemen and ladies in attendance withdrew, and we were alone. The little room had French windows opening on the gardens. The night was fine, cool, and fragrant. Flavia sat down, and I stood opposite her. I was struggling with myself. If she had not looked at me, I believe that even then I should have won my fight. But suddenly, involuntarily, she gave me one brief glance, a glance of question, hurriedly turned aside. A blush that the question had ever come spread over her cheek, and she caught her breath. Ah, if you had seen her! I forgot the King in Zenda. I forgot the King in Strelsau. She was a princess, and I an impostor. Do you think I remembered that? I threw myself on my knee and seized her hands in mine. I said nothing. Why should I? The soft sounds of the night set my wooing to a wordless melody as I pressed my kisses on her lips. She pushed me from her, crying suddenly: "Ah, it is true! Or is it only because you must?" "It's true," I said, in low, smothered tones. "True that I love you more than life, or truth, or honour." She set no meaning to my words, treating them as one of love's sweet extravagances. She came close to me and whispered: "Oh, if you were not the King, then I could show you how I love you. How is it that I love you now, Rudolf?" "Now?" "Yes, just lately. I never did before." Pure triumph filled me. It was I, Rudolf Rassendyll, who had won her. I caught her round the waist. "You didn't love me before?" I asked. She looked up into my face, smiling as she whispered: It must have been your crown. I felt it first on the coronation day." "Never before?" I asked eagerly. She laughed low. "You speak as if you would be pleased to hear me say yes to that," she said. "Would yes be true?" "Yes." I just heard her breathe, and she went on in an instant. "Be careful, Rudolf. Be careful, dear. He will be mad now." "What, Michael? If Michael were the worst, what worse is there?" There was yet a chance for me. Controlling myself with a mighty effort, I took my hands off her and stood a yard or two away. I remember now the note of the wind in the elm trees outside. "If I were not the King," I began. "If I were only a private gentleman." Before I could finish, her hand was in mine. "If you were a convict in the prison of Strelsau, you would be my King," she said. And under my breath I groaned, "God forgive me!" And holding her hand in mine, I said again, "If I were not the King." "Hush, hush!" she whispered. "I don't deserve it. I don't deserve to be doubted. Ah, Rudolf, does a woman who marries without love look on the man as I look on you?" And she hid her face from me. For more than a minute we stood there together, and I, even with my arm about her, summoned up what honour and conscience, her beauty, and the toils that I was in, had left me. "Flavia," I said, in a strange, dry voice that seemed not my own, "I am not..." As I spoke, she raised her eyes to me. There was a heavy step on the gravel outside, and a man appeared at the window. A little cry burst from Flavia as she sprang back from me. My half finished sentence died on my lips. Sapt stood there, bowing low, but with a stern frown on his face. "A thousand pardons, sire," said he, "but his Eminence the Cardinal has waited this quarter of an hour to offer his respectful adieu to your Majesty." I met his eye full and square, and I read in it an angry warning. How long he had been a listener I knew not, but he had come in upon us in the nick of time. "We must not keep his Eminence waiting," said I. But Flavia, in whose love there lay no shame, with radiant eyes and blushing face, held out her hand to Sapt. She said nothing, but no man could have missed her meaning who had ever seen a woman in the exaltation of love. A sour yet sad smile passed over the old soldier's face, and there was tenderness in his voice as, bending to kiss her hand, he said: "In joy and sorrow, in good times and bad, God save your Royal Highness." He paused, and added, glancing at me and drawing himself up to military erectness: "But before all comes the King. God save the King." And Flavia caught at my hand and kissed it, murmuring: "Amen. Good God, Amen." We went into the ballroom again. Forced to receive adieus, I was separated from Flavia. Every one, when they left me, went to her. Sapt was out and in of the throng, and where he had been, glances and whispers were rife. I doubted not that, true to his relentless purpose, he was spreading the news that he had learnt. To uphold the crown and beat Black Michael, that was his one resolve. Flavia, myself, I, and the real King in Zenda were pieces in his game, and pawns have no business with passions. Not even at the walls of the palace did he stop. For when at last I handed Flavia down the broad marble steps and into her carriage, there was a great crowd awaiting us, and we were welcomed with deafening cheers. What could I do? Had I spoken then, they would have refused to believe that I was not the King. They might have believed that the King had run mad. By Sapt's devices and my own ungoverned passion, I had been forced on, and the way back had closed behind me. And the passion still drove me in the same direction as the devices seduced me. I faced all Strelsau that night as the King and the accepted suitor of the Princess Flavia. At last, at 3 in the morning, when the cold light of dawning day began to steal in, I was in my dressing room, and Sapt alone was with me. I sat like a man dazed, staring into the fire. He puffed at his pipe. Fritz was gone to bed, having almost refused to speak to me. On the table by me lay a rose. It had been in Flavia's dress, and as we parted she had kissed it and given it to me. Sapt advanced, his hand towards the rose, but with a quick movement I shut mine down upon it. "That's mine," I said, "not yours, nor the King's either." "We struck a good blow for the King tonight," said he. I turned on him fiercely. "What's to prevent me striking a blow for myself?" I said. He nodded his head. "I know what's in your mind," he said. "Yes, lad, but you're bound in honour." "Have you left me any honour?" "Oh, come, to play a little trick on a girl." "You can spare me that. Colonel Sapt, if you would not have me utterly a villain, if you would not have your King rot in Zenda while Michael and I play for the great stake outside, you follow me?" "Ay, I follow you." "We must act, and quickly. You saw tonight, you heard tonight." "I did," said he. "Your cursed acuteness told you what I should do. Well, leave me here a week, and there's another problem for you. Do you find the answer?" "Yes, I find it," he answered, frowning heavily. "But if you did that, you'd have to fight me first, and kill me." "Well, if I had, or a score of men, I tell you I could raise all Strelsau on you in an hour, and choke you with your lies. Yes, your mad lies in your mouth." "It's gospel truth," he said. "Thanks to my advice, you could." "I could marry the princess and send Michael and his brother together to..." "I'm not denying it, lad," said he. "Then, in God's name," I cried, stretching out my hands to him, "let us go to Zenda and crush this Michael, and bring the King back to his own again." The old fellow stood and looked at me for full a minute. "And the princess?" he said. I bowed my head to meet my hands, and crushed the rose between my fingers and my lips. I felt his hand on my shoulder, and his voice sounded husky as he whispered low in my ear: "Before God, you're the finest Elphberg of them all. But I have eaten of the King's bread, and I am the King's servant. Come, we will go to Zenda." And I looked up and caught him by the hand, and the eyes of both of us were wet.